Masahiro Sakurai brought something unique to the platform fighting space back when Smash 64 was released. From that point on, he created a new genre of games that inspires so many different versions that we have today. Some of these versions turn out really well and even get into tournaments, but sometimes these versions fail miserably. These spin-offs don't really stay in the mainstream that long, mainly just getting worse, too repetitive, greedy, or too neglectful of fans. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl failed at first before the second game saw any success. PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale flopped horribly, with Sony not even acknowledging it anymore. However, the biggest disappointment we're going to go over is a game that got a second chance and instead ran it into the ground to become worse than their own beta stage, MultiVersus. Before we get into why MultiVersus failed, let's talk about what it is and when it started. Back in November 2021, Warner Bros. Gave us our first look at what the game we're getting looks like, and from that point alone, everyone was hyping the game up. Now we all know that Smash Ultimate is the definitive king of platform fighters, but at this point, we were waiting on something new, and Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 came out, so we definitely needed something good. Everyone was talking about how good it was going to be, specifically the character selection. The whole point of the game, or the devs' main objective, is that you do online 2v2s with various characters under Warner Bros. IP. So that means you can have something along the lines of Batman and Shaggy versus Harley Quinn and Taz. However, since the start, people were hoping for characters like Ben 10 and Daffy Duck, but meanwhile they put Iron Giant in the game. So the game finally released in 2022, and it definitely was hot for a minute, but it eventually fell off and shut down for 2 years. During this time, if you downloaded it before, you could still play offline with local friends, but no one was interested in that. Eventually, they did come back in 2024 with new characters and ideas like Jason Voorhees and the Joker, but as you can imagine, that not only failed, but somehow did worse than the beta, and the devs really have no one to blame but themselves. In this video, I'm going to go over the 4 reasons why MultiVersus failed miserably, and give my final verdict on what I think the future looks like. The first reason we got is diminishment, and I mean specifically the gameplay because good lord it got worse. Let's first talk about the speed. When we got a look at the game when it first came back, they also showed off the refined gameplay, and people didn't really like it because on top of the fact that the characters got bigger, which wasn't the biggest issue, they also brought down the speed of every character. At first I kinda thought, alright, I'll get used to it, but when I actually played it, I just didn't find that much fun in it anymore. The beta was fun because you were moving around at high speeds and just being wacky. Now, it's just slow and boring with no real standout elements to make it unique. Sure, there's wall clinging and parries, but other than that, nothing. Then there's the players and their online experience. I experienced this multiple times, and I know I'm not alone because a lot of people had the same problem. Getting a connection on this game is damn near a chore. Half the time, I'm able to get a good connection, but other times, I'm found launched off the stage after 5 seconds of frozen glitches or just an insane amount of lag. And like I said, I know it's not just me because multiple people have experienced this. It might tie into why their player base did horrible after a month. There was a significant drop in the number of players because they couldn't fix their servers and it had an insane amount of rubber banding. So as a result, their player count went from 53,000 to a whopping 100 players. Now the next thing we have is repetition, and it's kind of split between 2 different sections. Something I noticed when playing with different characters is that a lot of them have moves that kind of don't work together. Like they're fun and creative, but if you're trying to do different combos, not a lot of moves work in those situations. Which is why characters like Harley Quinn and Bugs really have one move that helps them kill off the top. Characters like Jake have a bunch of moves that really don't combo into each other. Meanwhile, characters like Finn and Jason have more moves that actually allow them to get more combos and mix up the flow of gameplay. Sure, Jason may be a slow character, but his moves can change things up for once and make the game interesting. Another issue in this section is the progression. In the beta, the progression was real simple. There was no battle pass, no events, no other way of getting skins, and the only way to get characters was by coins. Back then, this was a much simpler method because it wasn't hard to get coins and characters didn't cost much for the beta standards. Not saying I don't like a challenge, but they just made it worse here. The way you unlock characters and skins now is essentially a representation of the devs backpedaling. They tried a bunch of different methods to keep players from complaining, but it was already too late. The grinding portion became too stale, and they just couldn't fix it in time. The next category we have is greed. Now this is understandable, especially for a game that's free. They need a way to monetize it and be able to continue putting characters, but their methods weren't that effective. This ties back to the progression part, but I want to talk more about this. One of the biggest contributions to the game's downfall is Gleamium and fighter currency. At the start of the game, Gleamium was pretty much the key to everything, but the problem was it's not like V-Bucks where you can get it in the battle pass. You have to make direct purchases and spend amounts of money equivalent to a Smash DLC character. You're better off just putting a $5 price tag on it instead of covering up with in-game currency. When they switched to fighter currency, you could toast someone and hope for a toast back, or play a character for a while to get some, but you're eventually gonna turn to spending real money. It made it extremely hard for free-to-play players, and it also didn't help that characters and skins were absurdly priced at times. So free-to-play was just non-existent. Battle Pass also gained some hate over time because of the limited rewards you got from it. Sometimes you barely got enough XP to level up from each match, and they would even remove certain rewards from it. There were times when the free characters weren't even there, and some skins were removed on top of that, which just resulted in, like I said earlier, spending actual money. I can say that when I first played the game again last year, I knew the Battle Pass was going to bring some problems, and my biggest gripe with it was the fact that it was trying to be Fortnite but for fighting games. It wasn't a bad idea, but the issue with it now is that stuff like the fighter road is essentially the battle pass for fighters. So there's no real point in grinding anymore because the reason a lot of people were grinding for was actually solved. And since you couldn't get Gleamium in the battle pass like V-Bucks in Fortnite's battle pass, people slowly realized there's just no point. Finally, we have the neglectful aspect of the game. This was probably the biggest contributor to the game because it was really MultiVersus being stubborn, and it narrows down to two things. The first being the characters. I already made a video on what characters I think should have been added to the game, and I have a part 2 planned, but here, I want to go into detail as to why the roster was a negative factor. When we first looked at the game, the selection looked promising. You have DC, Looney Tunes, Game of Thrones, Scooby-Doo, and Adventure Time, even the Iron Giant being represented. But when they started adding characters, the selection became bland because they kept adding either DC characters or Looney Tunes characters, with the occasional new franchise. A lot of fans were upset because they added characters like Banana Guard and LeBron James himself before adding characters like Daffy Duck, Wile E. Coyote, Dexter, Ben 10, etc. Even going out of their way to make their own original character. And the thing about Dexter was the fact that they teased him in their trailer when they came back, but it just never happened, which made me think, if they had the right of way to reference him, wouldn't that mean they had the okay to add him in the game? It kinda feels weird to reference something coming only for it to never happen. And also double down bringing in new franchises, but just forgetting about him entirely. A whole list of characters was revealed that were supposedly getting work or were finished, and while Raven, Powerpuff Girls, and Nubia were done, the others that could have saved the game never saw the light of day. So everything I've talked about up to this point, what does it all tie back to? Lack of communication. Warner Bros. And Player First Games pretty much did their own thing throughout the 2024 launch. They put the characters that they wanted like Black Adam, Nubia, and LeBron James, despite no one asking for them. I understand if it's a licensing issue, but if they have the right of way, they had no one to blame but themselves. Ironically, they said that they wanted to support a new netcode, but when we finally started playing online, a ton of people had pretty bad online experiences. Even something as simple as the beta shutting down was poor communication, as they said nothing about why the game shut down at the time. Granted, it was an open beta, but after that, they pretty much went silent. I feel like the only thing they got right was the nerfs. As expected, the devs would nerf characters that were either too strong or buff characters that needed help, and one in particular I remember was them removing the Iron Giant to fix his strength. While this was a good attempt at fixing him, why did you feel the need to make him unplayable entirely? I get that they were trying to help, but it just kinda looked bad on their part. Nick All-Star Brawl has a couple characters that are either too strong or too fast, but they never had this issue. Smash Bros definitely had overpowered characters regardless of size, but it never got to the point where they needed to remove characters. So with the game getting worse over time, progression becoming too repetitive, monetization being taken too far, and them not listening to fans when they tried to help, it's no surprise that MultiVersus eventually couldn't keep up with the community. And on May 30th, 2025, MultiVersus and Player First Games will shut down, and most likely for good. Overall, MultiVersus flopped. Am I upset that the game won't be online or active anymore? Yeah. Do I feel bad? Of course not. They did this entirely themselves. We pretty much advised them on what to do so that way the game could stay alive, and I understand not everything could happen, but some fans asked for the bare minimum and they still couldn't deliver. Looking back on it now, that video I made last year aged like milk. However, before I go, I want to give my final thoughts on how MultiVersus could have been saved, and that's with 3 different ways. 1. Just charge like $50 and make stuff DLC. 2. Do a community poll about once a month to see who could be added next season or what issues need to be fixed. And 3. If you're gonna have in-game currency, at least make it so you can get it through a battle pass. But yeah, rest in peace to MultiVersus. You got me and my friends through summer 2024, and you'll go down in Warner Bros. History. But anyways, I'm gonna end it right here. Do you think MultiVersus could have been saved? And with that, Zaz out. Also, let me know if you guys mess with this editing style.